Ellen, and all other Cabinet members. Apologies for absence. Agenda item 1.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Mike White. Sorry. I beg your pardon, Councillor Mike White. Councillor Mike Dirk.
Mike Dirk, okay.
Oh dear,
Great.
It's going to be one of those.
Yeah. And I'd like to welcome Ellen Morgan-Rees. Ellen, why we've asked you to come today is because as a PDC, we don't want to try and duplicate things because some of this is in education. So if you feel that we, should say that go to the education PDC, be quite happy with your feelings on that. Item 2, any disclosures of personal prejudicial? No. Go on to item 3, which is the minutes for accuracy. Page 1, page 2. No. Can I have someone to sign them off, please?
Move that, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Mike. Well, we will go on to item 4. We're going through these very, very quick, which is we go on to item 4 then, which is the employment in programme update to provide the economy and environment PDC with an update on the employability programme. Elliot Williams joins us today. He's presenting the agenda item. Welcome, Elliot, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, just to introduce myself, I'm Elliot Williams. I work in the Economic Development and External Funding team within Place, and here today to provide an update on the employability programmes, of which a number of the programmes we sort of manage within the team, and we jointly coordinate and administer some other projects in collaboration with social services, tackling poverty service. So just to provide an update, the report was, hopefully the report has been circulated for everyone to see, so I won't go through it in extensive detail, but I'll just provide you with a bit of an overview, really. Currently, Swansea Council sort of administers and manages a number of employability projects and works quite closely with external organisations as well through its Swansea Employability Network. To try and ensure that the right employability provision is in place for people in need of employment support, training, and the like. Currently, we operate 5 employability projects, a lot of which are European funded. So those projects are Workways Plus, which there are 2 projects, one for long-term and the one for those who are long-term unemployed and economically inactive, and another for those short-term unemployed. We've also got the Communities of Work project and Communities of Work Plus, and more recently we have the Kickstart project. Until approximately July this year, we did have an additional project, the Camnessa project, which operated for a 3-year period, but the funding for that project came to an end. You'll see with the report, probably worth me sharing this, it would be helpful. We'll just see if I can share screen a second. There's an appendix attached to the report that provided sort of a summary, really, of the projects and what the sort of client group that they target, and the kind of support that's on offer. So let me just see if I can share that. So I'm just waiting for my laptop to catch up here. Can everyone see this?
Yes, I can see it, Ben.
Elliot,
sorry.
That's okay. Great. Yeah, so just it's a simple summary, really. There's a lot of similarities between what the projects are able to offer, but if we look at a lot of these projects sort of commenced in sort of 2016, 2017 time, the start of this latest EU funding cycle, and it's kind of responded to the need for additional employability support above and beyond the mainstream support that you'd see from perhaps Careers Wales or Job Centre Plus and that kind of thing. Again, as a result of European funding, there's a recognition that Swansea is an area of deprivation and need for additional support then for those who have work limiting health conditions, low skilled or long-term unemployed, and that sort of thing. So if you look at the projects here, you've got communities for work, there's youth and adult strand to this, so it's able to support individuals 16 to 24 NEETs, and also those aged 25 plus. But generally speaking, they operate within the forms of communities first areas geographically. So again, targeting those with low or no skills, work limited health conditions, or 54 plus. CamNESA was, like I said, has ended now, but that was targeting, again, 16 to 24-year-olds furthest away from the labour market, predominantly tier 2 NEETs, but anyone residing anywhere within Swansea, not just limited to communities first areas. 25 plus, the Workways Plus project supports those 25 plus outside communities first areas. Again, similar sort of target group. The short-term unemployed project supports those individuals 25 plus who are immediately unemployed. They don't have to have been unemployed for a 12-month period or economically inactive. And again, same sort of barriers, same sort of constraints that people might be facing. We also then have Communities for Work Plus, which where the eligibility and abilities to support people is far more flexible than some of the EU-funded projects. Communities for Work Plus is Welsh Government funded. And more recently, then we have the Kickstart project, which is a UK government funded programme, which came about as a result of the pandemic, and is the aim of that project is to establish 6-month paid work placements for those NEETs aged 16 to 24 who are in receipt of universal credit. And the idea with that project is to, like I say, help get people into 6-month placements, provide some wraparound support, so that they're fully funded placements within businesses across Swansea, or within the council. We've been successful in setting up in around the region of 300 placements across various businesses and Swansea Council itself, and that seems to be going really well at the moment, providing people with tangible work experience and a salary, and some sort of skills really to sort of progress on from those placements. And some of the placements they've been on have actually resulted in permanent work as well after that, which is great. So that's something that we've supported more recently. I suppose the message here with some of the this sort of chart really, to sort of show there's a lot of similarity and synergies, I guess, between these projects, but they have responded to sort of the need for support in different cohorts and different client groups, and also how the funding has been sort of split up through different priorities at a national level. So some of these projects, Communities for Work, for example, was a Welsh Government designed programme operating in majority of local authorities across Wales, while Workways Plus was something that was designed more locally on a regional footprint, again responding to the needs of the local area. So if I just take that off screen a second, and yeah, so I suppose one of the key issues we've got at the moment, in terms of that kind of hopefully provides a bit of an overview really of the programs that we're delivering. And as I mentioned earlier, there is the Swansea Employability Network, which there are 40 plus partners, partner agencies, third sector partners and the like, and Job Centre and Careers Wales and those sorts of agencies, where we meet regularly to make sure that we're working collaboratively to ensure that the right support is in place across all the providers, and we quite often refer participants to more appropriate projects if there's any specific needs that individual may have, where another project might be in a better place to provide that sort of support. You know, for example, if there were drug and alcohol issues in a particular case, then we would refer to another organisation for that sort of support. So it's we like to think things are quite joined up, but there is quite a complex landscape of employability provision out there. One thing to note, as you probably saw from the chart, I don't know whether you could have seen the detail, but the type of support that we provide through those projects is sort of outreach, community outreach and engagement, dedicated intensive employment mentoring for the individual, a triage and assessment of needs for that individual. We help them to develop action plans. We look at support to overcome barriers such as confidence building, and helping to source training, qualifications. We arrange volunteering and paid work opportunities, and ultimately help with job search and mapping skills to those jobs. We also, of course, link in with other support providers in terms of advice and guidance around welfare support and that sort of thing. One thing we've looked to do, I say, more recently with Kickstart is utilise sort of some of the successes of projects such as Workways, and that have worked really well with a team of mentors and employee liaison officers there. The employee liaison officers through Workways were able to quickly tap into their contacts with businesses across Swansea and offer up placements through Kickstart to say, look, here's a fully funded 6-month opportunity. If you're keen to support young people into employment, if you've got new opportunities you can create, it'll be fully funded by DWP, and that seems to work really well. And it's something we've been looking to make the most of for some time. More recently, there's the City Deal funding for the Skills and Talent Programme as well, which is something new coming down the track now. So I think that provides us with a bit of an opportunity really to look at how that dovetails with some of our existing employability projects, and more specifically, I guess, is looking at where there are skills gaps and how we address those skills gaps through future provision. Sorry. Are there any questions so far?
Sorry, Chairman, I did just put my hand up, if I may ask a question. You mentioned on the bottom of your chart, basically the sources of funding. How much are we actually getting on an annual basis in this respect currently? And obviously Calmness has disappeared and Kickstart presumably is the replacement for that. I'm not quite sure if that's correct, but that's the way it looks, certainly. Sorry, the Communities for Work Plus might be the replacement for Calmness. I'm just wondering how much funding it has been made available for us in Swansea enabled to do this sort of work.
I mean, across the European projects, so the only projects that aren't European funded, like I say, Kickstart, which is DWP, and Communities for Work Plus. I think Communities for Work Plus's budget is in the region of 1.6 million per annum, whilst the other European projects over their sort of 5-year period, I think it's in the region of sort of £12 million of European funding, so probably in the region of sort of 2 million a year thereabouts.
2.5 million a year, yeah.
2.5 million a year, yeah. Like I said, some of the projects, they were initially designed to run for sort of a 3-year period, but most will probably end up running to 5 to 6 years if we get an extension, but it'll be an extension within existing budget. So yeah, the overall budget for the European projects is around 12 million.
So what would the funding be used for then? Would it be used purely to provide personnel to provide the service, or is there any sort of payments to people who participate, or is there any purchase to assist in the process? And funding is spent, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Totally valid question. The budget is used across the projects to pay for the personnel, sort of the employment mentors, employee liaison officers to meet and support people. Like I say, they provide engagement, outreach activity, they provide mentoring support, but there is also budget for to pay for training and qualifications for individuals as well. Within some of the projects, there was also budget for paid work opportunities similar to Kickstart, but on a more limited sort of 3-month scale maximum. So yeah, a lot of the resource goes on staff training, but also to pay for short-term paid placements as well.
Okay. And the payment for staff, does that mean those staff are on short-term contracts while the payment?
It does mean that, yes. I mean, a lot of the staff would have started sort of 2016, 2017 when the initial project started, and periodically those contracts have been extended as funding and timescales have been extended. But that is one of the risks we face at the moment with the European funded projects is funding is in place for most of the projects to the end of December 2022, and there's a possibility of an extension into sort of 3 months, possibly 6 months into 2023, but ultimately all European funds will end in 2023, mid sort of 2023 as a worst case, basically, yeah.
The temporary contracts, do they lead to problems with staff retention, or because people will obviously move on and look for full-time contracts eventually, wouldn't they?
Yeah, speaking from our experience of delivering workways, we haven't had a great deal of turnover thus far. Perhaps more recently, we've seen a little bit of turnover, but generally speaking, you know, a lot of the staff have been with us from the beginning of this iteration of the project. I will say that the previous iteration of workways that ran from 2009 to 2014 under the previous EU funding round, and unfortunately the funding came to an end before the new funding could become available. So a lot of staff were sort of redeployed at that time, and the project had to restart then sort of a year, 18 months after. So that is, dare I say, or has been an issue with fixed term funding, should we say.
Sorry about that.
Okay, sorry, is there another question?
Okay. Yeah, one for the chairman, basically. For goodness sake, holy. One for the chairman, effectively. Obviously, we are a PDC, and we are talking about temporary facilities here. Should we be talking to the cabinet member about providing these facilities on a permanent basis? I don't know whether that's a consideration that we should have in terms of this PDC, in terms of developing the policy. You're muted, Cyril.
Sorry, first time today. We'll note that and we'll put that as a suggestion going through Paxton.
I don't know if other members agree or not.
Well, we'll put it to the PDC.
But it obviously seems to be a valuable service, as I can see it, and obviously it's something that we want to continue, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, I would like it to continue.
Great, thanks. Sir, are there other questions, or
have you finished your presentation?
I haven't as yet. No.
Yeah.
I was just going to give an update on sort of the current position we're seeing in the sort of the landscape with employability at the moment.
Okay.
Peter and Phil want to come in.
Yeah, and Mike White. I'll continue with the questions first, then Elle, and then we'll sort it out. Phil down in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was going to ask, are we asking questions on the full report? Because I want to ask questions on the report itself. So I don't know whether Elliot wants to finish the report first, and then he may answer the question during finishing his report. So I think I'll wait until he finishes.
Okay.
I
think that's a good suggestion. Elliot, will you finish the report and then we'll
absolutely.
We'll go to questions later.
Okay. I'll try and keep it as short and sweet as possible, but pull out the key points for you. In section 3 of the report, we talk about the sort of the current economic and employability issues that we're facing, I guess, with it, that we're seeing in Swansea, and sort of the outputs or achievements then of some of the projects. So the council recently developed its economic recovery plan, and employability does feature quite strongly in that, in terms of addressing the support needed for those impacted by the pandemic. What we did see at the start of April 2020, when the Workway Short-Term Unemployed project commenced, is it was quite timely, as we saw a lot of people sort of transition, particularly in the hospitality industry, that were facing redundancy, and our projects were able to sort of step in and provide support to quickly transition people into some new job growth areas, perhaps in transport or care and that sort of thing. So during sort of 2020, UK output fell by 9.8%, but the Bank of England expects the growth there should be expected growth of 7.25% during 2021. The council has provided over £160 million worth of COVID-19 financial support to businesses during the pandemic. And we've also launched the new business Swansea service as well, which will link in again with our employability provision. And we've supported startup grants for businesses as well. The combined effort of the employability projects has seen over 4,500 people supported by those projects in the past 5 years, of which over 1,700 people have been supported directly into work. And like I said, we work closely with other organisations and council departments such as welfare rights, lifelong learning, business support to deliver that provision. During the pandemic, we supported over 1,200 people through the projects, of which 500 have been helped into work. So quite a lot has been done in this last 18 months to try and provide that support. What we're seeing in terms of the unemployment rate in Swansea is, as of June this year, unemployment was at 5% for Swansea, which is in line with the Welsh average, but below the 5.6% for the UK. And the rate was at 5.3% in May. So whilst we were at a higher rate than that last year at the onset of the pandemic, things do seem to be going marginally in the right direction in terms of the unemployment rate dropping. But it is still higher, markedly higher than the 3.4% we would have seen in June 19. I think I've already touched upon sort of the Kickstart programme, where we've got in excess of 300 placements now set up. And we have various placements set up within the council across building services, parks, waste management, and now we're rolling out more opportunities within social services as well to give people hands-on work experience. We also link in quite closely with the Beyond Bricks and Mortar team to make sure that social benefit clauses are built into council contracts. So through the working with Beyond Bricks and Mortar and the employability projects, nearly 6,400 training weeks were created, and various placements are set up within Buckingham, with the main contractor for the Copper Bay Phase 1. And what I would say is, in terms of the landscape, we've seen on the job market, where we are facing at the moment quite a interesting situation where there are plenty of vacancies out there, but we're not really seeing many people coming through from the job centre looking, or the people aren't necessarily engaging with us now at the moment with looking for work. So at the start of the pandemic, we saw a lot of throughput to our projects, initially with people being made redundant, and then when the furlough scheme kicked in, we still saw quite a surge of people coming through, but more recently we're seeing things have sort of slowed down, and the message from sort of DWP at the moment is that, you know, we weren't, perhaps Swansea hasn't been as negatively impacted by the pandemic as perhaps other areas. You know, we are an area where there's quite a lot of public sector employment. There wasn't a massive uptake for businesses to the furlough scheme initially, but we are also seeing perhaps a situation where people are reluctant to re-enter the job market as well. People are still apprehensive in the current sort of climate, and I think also the fact that DWP aren't sanctioning people at this point in time as well is perhaps having an impact too. We are seeing sort of there's well-known sort of shortages in certain areas such as health and social care, HGV, driving, of course, but retail and hospitality is a new one for us in terms of shortages. You know, that we've always seen in the past an abundance of people wanting to get into retail and hospitality, perhaps, but there's again a reluctance to perhaps go into those sort of sectors now. So the projects are trying to be proactive, getting back out in the community. During the first sort of 9 to 12 months of the pandemic, most of the staff across all the projects were working remotely to support people. Whilst we were able to do that quite successfully, there are, of course, some people we need to ideally engage with in person, one-to-one. So with now risk assessments in place with community centres and community venues, we are back out in the community trying to engage and drum people up to support them through training, placements and employment. In terms of opportunities and challenges, like I say, there is some complexities. As you know, I've shown you that chart today of the different projects. There are 5 worst sex projects targeting different cohorts of people providing similar support. There's perhaps merit in us looking, you know, something to consider going forward with any future projects, or should we get funding for any other employment provision going forward, is how we perhaps align some of that work really and simplify it for the participant looking for employment support. There's also opportunities to work with colleagues in education around how we tackle skills and the pipeline of people coming through, and what and linking also to a lot of the regen schemes that we have coming down the track. We need to understand a bit more of what skills and qualifications are needed, perhaps, so we can build a pipeline of people coming through. So there's perhaps more we can do, I suppose, to build on some of the projects and provision we've been delivering so far and take things to another level. Yeah, so like I say, I think that's probably covers most of the points I wanted to raise, really. But yeah, as Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams mentioned earlier, there is an issue, I suppose, in terms of funding going forward. We are proactively as a team looking for alternative sources of funding. There will be the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which we're hoping will provide some opportunities for us to develop employability provision going forward, with hopefully less complexity than what we would have seen with the European funding. And we have previously put in a bid to the Community Renewal Fund, which again was UK government funded, to try and pilot a new approach to how we deliver employability by integrating a lot of the features of those projects into one offer. Again, offering placements and making sure that we can provide sort of traineeships and skills development in work mapped to what we know we're going to need 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And again, there's opportunities to link things to the skills and talent program as well. It's probably sums up everything I want to sort of mention there today from the report. Are there any sort of questions?
Yeah, 1 second. Thank you, Elliot, for a comprehensive report there. I'll open it up now to questions. Phil Downing.
I don't know whether this is a question or more than what Paxton ended up when he was speaking, Chair. That looking at 5.6, 7 and 8, where it says that going forward, the EU funds and our current programme ends in December 2022.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to say that a report could be brought back with the formulating a policy. Well, my view is that this should be done much sooner than that, whether it's the beginning of 22 or the middle, so that we are ready for when these programmes finish, that we are ready for a new programme to start. And if any grants do come down the pipeline, then we're in a prime position.
Thank you, Phil. Saying that on 5.8, that's what one of my questions was going to be, Elliot. You're thinking of fetching it back to the PDC when it runs out in 2022, December 2022. Would it be worth our while of having some workshops with officers, a series of workshops to try and make up a policy before it runs out?
Yes, I suppose there's merit in that, certainly, and I think that's something that we're looking at as officers. I suppose at this point is we've got to start looking at what comes next, isn't it? I guess, yeah, it will be in some ways. It's one of the issue we've got at the moment, I suppose, is the existing projects are designed in such a way they have to deliver what they're delivering. But I suppose there's lessons to be learned from those projects, and perhaps now is a good time for us to start looking at, right, what has worked well from those projects, what gaps in revision are there, how do we want to take things to a different level next in the future, I guess. So yeah, there's certainly merit in that.
Okay, thank you, Elliot. I know Martin wants to come in. Martin, do you want to wait until all the questions have been asked?
Do you mind, Chair, if I come in, because it is on that specific point, if I may? Okay. I was just going to add to what Elliot had said. The challenge is that we don't know what's going to come next. It might be nothing, or it might be funding by a government that has equally the same number of strings attached in terms of some of the current programmes. So I absolutely support the idea of workshopping and looking at a policy. Just that bit of caution, really. There's a danger of doing too much work before the next steps are clear. You could come up with a very clear policy, and then the funding routes that are available then supersede what you intended to deliver in that policy. But I probably I would agree in terms of going to decide or trying to decide what we believe we need as a council. Rather than wait until what comes out and then missing the opportunity. So it's a bit of a risk, but I would have thought if you were sort of middle of 2022 starting to have this conversation as a PDC and workshopping it, then I would have thought that wouldn't be wasted time. Of course, it'd be ideal to know what comes next first, but that isn't going to be possible because very often, as you'll know, grant awards and grant opportunities come out with ridiculously short notice. And what we don't want to do is leave it, not discuss it, and then find that we just don't have the chance to do it in time before the next window of opportunity arises. So I do agree. In hindsight, probably mid 2022 will be a good time to start this further discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Peter Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I would endorse the approach that we've just been discussing. I would agree with the idea of setting up a working group or series of working groups later in the middle part of next year to address the problem that we're discussing. And that leads on actually to the point or 2 points I wanted to make in relation to the report. One question is, how does Swansea compare as a city with other comparable cities? I'm not quite sure what they might be or where they might be in terms of the proportion of the 16 to 24 age group who are not in education, employment or training. Is it higher in Swansea? Are we comparable? Are we lower perhaps? So I think that's the first point that I'd make. And then related to that, or maybe related to that, there's a kind of a mismatch, it seems to me, in terms of the report. On the one hand, we have what is clearly a very successful employability training scheme, and I would congratulate the council officers concerned for that. But yet we can't fill vacancies, and that leads one on to ask the question: well, are we training for the wrong types of skill and employability opportunity? In other words, we've heard from Elliot that there are obviously some very good reasons. I'm sure he's right in terms of why perhaps unemployed folk are not taking up the vacancies that are available in Swansea. But one has to ask, or at least I have to ask, to what extent are we taking account of the areas where the vacancies exist and then ensuring that our employability training schemes are delivering the kind of skills that the employers in those areas want, and thus enabling people to go into those jobs, assuming that they want to. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think just to pick up on your second point there, I suppose the way the employability projects have tended to work is there's two parts of the team in a sense. You've got the in terms of the delivery teams, quite often you've got the employment mentor who provides the support for the individual and tries to understand what their sort of skills, what their interests are in terms of employment and training, that sort of thing. And then you've got the employer liaison function, which is all about engaging with businesses and understanding what the business needs and what they're looking for. So there is a part of the teams then of the employability teams that are engaged with businesses and trying to map out what sort of skills and things they need, I guess. I suppose it's limited perhaps in terms of the ability to inform and arrange sort of training for certain sort of niche areas of work, I guess, or niche skills. But generally speaking, there is a sort of a matching process really where the employee liaison officers give us a bit of an insight really into what businesses are generally looking for, and then we feed that to the feed that information to the mentor staff and the participants that we're supporting to say, look, this is an area of growth. This is something that you might be interested in. Yes, I know you want to. I know you'd like to go into this area of work, but actually, with your skills and transferable skills, there's opportunities over here. So there's a lot that does happen with existing projects, but there's probably, admittedly, more we could do, and that's perhaps where things such as the Skills and Talent Programme and other initiatives might come in to help us and take that wider view. With again working with the colleges and with other organisations that are plugged into businesses to know what's coming down the track, where the skills gaps are, so we can feed that in and pick people up earlier and make sure the right training is in place. And I think with that, it's all about having a combination of tools in the projects really, or the schemes, to sort of provide that workplace-based sort of job role, but also training alongside, because quite often we find a lot of people who are perhaps in the low skill sort of area of things. They're quite keen to get into work, have a salary, but learn alongside as part of the day job, and that seems to work quite well then in terms of future progression with people as well. So there are lots of things that we can explore in terms of improvements and enhancements, but a lot of that does happen in terms of matching people and trying to direct people, navigate people into different areas of work than perhaps they originally thought, to try and cater to the market really. As for your initial question about sort of the 16 to 24-year-olds, I need to take that away and look at the stats. I'm afraid I don't have that to hand at the moment in terms of needs compared to other areas.
Okay, can I just come back quickly, Chair, if I may, on my main concern about the mismatch between vacancies and employability training. To what extent are we actively approaching employers and saying, what is it that you want? What are the skills that you need? What are the kind of vacancies that you need to fill that the employment market at the moment seems unable to fill, to try and ensure that, and also, of course, related to that, to what extent are we encouraging employers to undertake the training themselves, rather than relying on the public sector to pay, in a sense, to produce skilled workers in their area? To what extent, surely employers should be taking an active role in that as well?
Before we could answer that, Elliot, I've got Ellen Morgan-Rees wants to come in. Ellen?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Jones's question, if it's helpful, in terms of the labour market intelligence and the gathering of information. So we belong to a regional learning and skills partnership, and that partnership takes a key role in looking at the labour market intelligence, asking what small and medium-sized businesses actually want, and even larger organisations as well, not just in terms of really specific skills, but also the generic employability skills. And that skills plan is then published. The last one published by the Learning and Skills Partnership was in 2019. But that skills plan is widely shared. So it's shared with educators, it's shared with a range of stakeholders who have a vested interest in this. So there is some sharp intelligence gathering out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen, for that. I don't think Elliot needs to reply to that. Ellen have answered the question. Right, I'll go to Mike White is next. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think you've touched on some of the points that I wanted to raise, and everybody is thinking along the same lines, Chair. Yeah, you mentioned, obviously, you touched on the city deal projects and partners. I was just wondering, for people that wanted to go into a career of trades, how are we actually promoting this with our schools? And Helen had just said about the network there as well. And also, perhaps, because of the other different types of schemes that we got going, I think it's been 5 or 6, as you mentioned, Elliot. Would it perhaps be a way forward if we perhaps bank the best ideas we got, as we said, look, like go back to what Chair has said about workshops, and bank those ideas and could use them as good practice, as a way forward? If you could comment on that, please. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Yes, I agree. In terms of banking the ideas, I think there's a lot there for us to learn from, and I think officers would certainly look at objectively at sort of how projects have been delivered and what kind of tools and what's worked well, and we could certainly take that forward as part of any new initiatives. In terms of the skills and talent programme, I suppose all I would say is there's some opportunities there for us to start shaping that now, really, because it's only more recently that the scheme has been approved, and part of that is doing that initial analysis, linking into, as Helen said, the RLSP, to try and make sure that we're making sure that the skills and the training that are in place through the universities, the colleges, and also linked to employability.
Thanks, Elliot. Martin, I can see you put your hand back up. Do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's on that point, just to confirm that I know we shared some of this detail at a high level at the last PDC, but just to confirm, the City Deal Talent and Skills project is being delivered via the RLSP board that Helen described earlier. So there's a direct interrelationship between the City Deal project delivery and the education sector, college sector, and the employer representatives who sit on that RLSP, and they shape then the gap analysis that is required to inform where we think we need the skills, or actually where industry believes they need those skills, and where those opportunities will arise over the next few years. So whilst it's a City Deal project, it isn't only limited to assessing the needs for the City Deal other projects. It assesses the wider requirements for the region. So that will take a little bit of time to bed down, but I think, you know, I sit on that, Helen sits on it as well, and I think it's the right mechanism, that it's an industry-led approach. It has taken some time to get where it needs to, but I am pleased to say actually the business case has been signed off by both governments this week. So that's a big step in the right direction. So that'll be now picking up the pace. Just to also answer the question on the links with schools, as many councillors will know, we've for many years directly interfaced as an employer with schools in terms of our construction skills and our apprenticeships, and that was via the usual methodology. So it'll be through careers fairs, it'll be through the career service and other routes that we have in through the various schools. So, you know, we can always look to improve that, but we still have, you know, quite a large number of applicants when we advertise for apprenticeship opportunities for ourselves. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Martin. Helen, you want to come back in? Yeah, come in.
Thank you. Just on the role of education generally, and I can say more if you want me to later on, if needed. But it's clear that construction and other skill shortages areas are actually currently being addressed at our school level and also at a higher level on a national basis. So if we look, for example, in 2021 across all the skill shortage areas, and I think there are 5 that you're familiar with, you will see that across Swansea we had 430 learners actually actively engaged at pre-school leaving, so really at GCSE level, they were actually engaged in courses that are accredited for construction, and other skill shortage areas. Obviously, we're not saying that there's no work to be done in this area and it doesn't need improving, but just to give the committee some assurance that we're actually currently on this journey. So I know that the Skills and Talent Initiative, for example, mentions the need of 14,000 individuals to be upskilled over a 10-year period. Now, when you break that down into a per year figure for Swansea as one of the 4 local authorities, you can see that that equates to about 350 learners per year. So just quoting the fact that we've got 439 learners already engaged at GCSE level, there's more work to be done to convert that into the post-16, the post-compulsory age group for education. There's definitely more work to be done in terms of the numbers there. But coupled with Gower College as well, who are part of Swansea Skills Partnership. So this is very much a bespoke skills partnership that involves a range of officers, the Cabinet Member for Education. The work of this skills partnership has actually been a headline kind of project for the PDC in 2018. That was reported to Cabinet as well in 2018. And also its work has been subject to scrutiny through the education scrutiny route. So this skills partnership is looking at not just schools as educators, but FE and HE as well. So the whole kind of range really of education providers in Swansea are coming together to look at this agenda and have been doing it for some time. So the fact that the Skills and Talent Initiative is the 9th project really to be given the green light, I'm thinking. I'm hoping Martin will correct me if I'm wrong. But, you know, having that Skills and Talent Initiative really consolidates some of the work that's already happening. So it's not as if it's a light switch moment when the light switch has suddenly come on because we've had it approved at UK and Wales level. It's actually something that's ongoing. And further to that, the qualification system is also under review. So you will have heard in the press about a fortnight ago, the Qualifications Wales announced more qualifications in relation to manufacturing and engineering, that kind of thing. And eventually that will play out in the post-16 arena as well. So there's a lot of good existing work on this agenda. Not saying that there's not more work to be done, but I think schools and all the education providers in Swansea are really trying to get this up and running.
Thank you, Ellen. June, you got a question?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Following on what Helen has said, and I've discussed this with Elliot, and as PDC, we've discussed it in the past. Can we set up a joint meeting with the Education PDC to see how we can get together to improve and update the skills needed? We have said we would have this joint meeting, but nothing's happened as yet.
Right, June. Thank you, June. I'm sure we can, Ellen, go for a joint PDC meeting. The views, what's the views on the PDC members that we do a joint meeting with the education?
We've already agreed it, Chairman, in previous meetings.
Right, okay. So we'll put that forward then, June. Is there any more questions? No? I'd like to thank Elliot for his comprehensive report and for comments from officers. But we go back to Paxton. First of all, could you reiterate what you stated in your last request, mate?
Sorry, Chairman, I think perhaps in terms of what has been said, much of it has already been covered, but I was suggesting potentially in terms of the situation and the fact that some of these schemes are going to be disappearing, we ought to be looking at what we should be considering presenting to the Cabinet Member in terms of this, in terms of what policies he should be considering. But from what Martin has been saying and what Helen has been saying, a lot of that work I think has already been done. I think it's certainly indicated the fact that we need to be doing some workshops, certainly either in at the end of the first third or halfway through next year, somewhere about there, so that the mechanisms are in place there, so that if event funding becomes available, we know exactly what we want to apply for and how to apply for it. I think that's fair, Martin, isn't it, in terms of what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Cyril.
Thank you, Pax. So what will be decided then is that we'll take what is stated in 5.8 back to the PDC, and we'll set up workshops mid 2022. Is that right? Yeah. Are we all okay with that?
Just a little bit before.
Yeah, we're all okay with that. There's nothing else? No? Okay. On to the next agenda item then, which is economy, environment, work plan. On the 18th of November, we got the grey fleet. And somebody's talking. I'll mute you. Green fleet. Then on the 18th of November, we've got grey and green fleet. And then in December, questions online survey management and maintenance of open spaces, and the tree policy at the same time. So can we make a date for fetching this back to the PDC in for the Euro funding ending? Or shall we wait until later, Martin?
If I may, Chair, sorry, constitutionally, I might have to ask either Sam or Caritas to advise on this, but I'm not sure you can say, well, you may be able to set a programme for the next municipal year. I actually probably don't think we can, given the council ends in May. So I think probably what we need to do is state the intention to do so. But obviously the work programme can't be formulated until after council, and then after the new PDCs are set up around about May, June time. So I think I'm right. Am I, Sam? I see you nodding. So
you are right, Martin. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I was just about to say the same thing as well myself. So in terms of what I'm saying, I totally agree.
Thanks, Martin. Peter, you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. With reference to the work plan proposals for the meeting on 16 December, not only have we got management and maintenance of open spaces and tree policy, we've also got climate change strategy, including biodiversity. That's one hell of an agenda for one meeting, I would suggest, Chair. Climate change strategy alone deserves a meeting on its own, and the whole issue of management and maintenance of open spaces is at least contentious. There are issues there that will need to be raised and discussed. And tree policy, I don't know what the state of play is on tree policy, and I look forward to hearing that. But I would have thought that those three together, we'll be looking at a very long meeting to ensure that they're all properly covered. I just wonder whether other members take a similar view. I would suggest that climate change probably deserves, including biodiversity, might add, climate change, including biodiversity, deserves a meeting on its own. Thank you, Chair.
June?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In response to Peter, I don't think the questions for the online survey are going to take that long. And I think climate change strategy is important, and we will be spending a lot of time on that. But I know this is the work plan, but we can add in special meetings. If we have a joint meeting with education, that can be outside of the work plan strategy. We could have a specific date for that outside of our work plan. Is that correct, Chair?
Yes, we could. We could have it outside. We don't have to formally be as a PDC to do it. we can go outside the work plan. Yes, you're quite right, June. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to make the same point as Councillor Jones in terms of the risk of the length of the agenda on the December meeting. Just to confirm, however, it's intended at the moment that the updated report on climate change and nature will be going to Cabinet in November, and that will be setting out the proposed direction of travel. So all members will have, assuming Cabinet approved that report, all members will have had the Cabinet report. It will have been approved by Cabinet, and therefore one opportunity maybe is for the PDC in its meeting in December to identify, arising out of that Cabinet report, which specific policy areas they would like to be discussed in that December session, rather than a for information report where you get the whole report to discuss. Now, I'm quite happy to do whatever the committee would wish, but that may be one way of focusing it onto the true policy development rather than the overall Cabinet report that's going to be submitted. But maybe members want to wait until they've seen that report going to Cabinet before making that final decision. It is quite hefty, and the tree policy on there in itself is going to be probably quite a long discussion, because it is intending to outline a new proposed approach for where we would plant trees, what species we would plant, right tree for right place, so that we will have those future tree planting maps being developed, and as and when opportunities to bid for grants come along, we would then already know where we're going to put them. Whereas at the moment, there's a little bit of an ad hoc approach to how and where we manage tree planting. So that's the intention, Chair. I'm quite happy to bring as much as you want to that meeting, but it is, Councillor Burton is right. The questions part of it is, I think, the shorter bit. It's the other two items that are quite hefty.
Yeah, Chair, could I just add, in relation to scrutiny in the Natural Environment Performance Panel that I chair, we're devoting a whole meeting early next year to climate change, and we feel that's the scale of time and provision that it deserves. And I've simply reinforced the point that I would agree with Martin that once Cabinet has had a look at this, we can look at it in December, but we won't be able to look at it with the scale of detail that, I know my own performance panel will be looking at it, I think, in March next year. But it is a topic on its own, obviously.
Okay.
Could I suggest, Chair, a way of perhaps then, if we would just add to the wording where we've got on the work plan, the climate change strategy, including biodiversity, and indicate in that report summary, it's to identify new areas of policy that the PDC may wish to investigate, then that can be an initial discussion, and that can form the basis of a much more detailed work plan.
Okay, and that stays on the 16th of December, yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
And if you'll indulge me, Chair, may I just go back, sorry, to the November meeting? I just wanted to clarify something, if the committee are happy. We've got them two titles down as Grey Fleet and Green Fleet. There's been some recent developments where we are required to provide to Welsh Government a new ultra-low emission vehicle strategy, which is currently being drafted. And the reason it had to be drafted quite quickly is to be able to draw down circa £300,000 worth of Welsh Government grant to install new EV infrastructure points. But what we are doing as part of that is setting out a draft strategy for how the council will transition its whole vehicle fleet, all 750 vehicles, from its current mix of diesel petrol with some EV into a future ultra-low emission fleet by 2030. So I think rather than bringing back the green fleet in isolation, it would be probably better use of the committee's time to have that draft strategy, and that will how that aligns to the green fleet, because effectively it underpins the green fleet policy. And in the same report, there are references and opportunities to comment then on the grey fleet policy aspects as well. So sorry, bit of context now rather than me explaining it next time. But if that's okay, we'll slightly amend the report headings and feed that, Sam, into yourself, so we can just get the agenda item narrative correctly.
Okay. Got that, Sam? Yeah. Yeah, I take it as a yes. He was on mute. Okay. So we've all agreed on that the EU funding for 2022 will come in late after the next election, and the climate change wording and all that has been changed, will be changed. If there's no other business, if that is clear, I'll call the meeting to an end.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
Yep.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.